think they had it over here too on the other side. I'll leave it here.
Oh, you got my list. Oh, yes, you got my list.
There she is. You're here. Well, good evening. I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Urbana City Council. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Miss Wu,
Here.
Mr. Evans,
Here.
Miss Hersey,
Here.
Miss Colasetti,
Here.
Miss Bishop,
Here.
Miss Wilkin,
Here.
Mr. Quisenberry, Mayor Marlin.
Here. I would like to note for the record that Mr. Quisenberry has asked us to announce that he is absent due to a medical reason. Next up is approval of minutes from the previous meeting of March 27th, 2023. Could I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mary Alice, seconded by Sharice. Are there any substantial corrections? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That motion passes. Are there any additions to the agenda? There are no additions to the agenda. We have a number of presentations today and public input. So first up is the Urbana Fire Department promotions.
Good evening. No matter how many times we do this, seems like the nerves don't go away. So once again, I'd like to thank the council, say good evening to the council and members of the public, the Urbana Fire Department family and extended family. As always, it's an honor. I consider it an honor to stand here when I have an opportunity to either present a new hire or recognize a member of our department that gets promoted. This evening, I'm gonna present to you Josh Fitzsimmons. So if you can come on up. Like always, excuse me, like always when we talk about our promotions, tonight Josh is being promoted from firefighter to engineer. So what does that mean? That means Josh has now assumed more responsibility he's the one who is now in charge of driving our trucks, making sure the truck is in shape for service, and he's in charge of every single time he gets behind the wheel, he's now taking the lives of our citizens and our employees into his hands. He makes sure that we get to the scenes and home safely. So with that, I'm going to have Josh come up, and he's going to give his oath.
Here's a copy for you to read along. You're going to need that. So raise your right hand, please. Repeat after me. I, Joshua Fitzsimmons,
I, Joshua Fitzsimmons,
do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the duties of the position of engineer
do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the duties of the position of engineer
for the city of Urbana in the county of Champaign, Illinois,
for the city of Urbana in the county of Champaign, Illinois,
and will, to the best of my ability,
and will to the best of my ability
preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States,
preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States,
the state of Illinois,
the state of Illinois,
and the charter and ordinances of the city of Urbana,
and the charter and ordinances of the city of Urbana,
acting rightfully for the citizens of Urbana.
acting rightfully for the citizens of Urbana,
So help me God.
so help me God.
Congratulations.
I like to say, Josh has been with the Urbana Fire Department for 7 years, and now engineer Josh Fitzsimmons is also a paramedic. He's a hazardous materials technician. He's also the president of Local 1147, the Firefighters Union. And tonight, Josh will be pinned by his wife, Kayla.
Get Phyllis to sign it tomorrow. Be careful taking those corners, okay? It's off. Okay, move on to the annual report from the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission, and Bill Brown will be presenting that.
Hello, Council. Good to be here. Good to see you again. So this is our annual report from 2022. It's a couple months late, but we try to get it out usually in February. It was ready maybe end of March, but we're finally on the schedule. So this year, yeah, we had a couple changes in committee members, but also still quite a few people that have been on for quite a while. We have some people representing by city code. We have to have a representative from the school district, the University of Illinois Park District, the city engineer, and that's it by code. But then we've also have someone kind of semi-representing MTD, I mean officially representing from MTD's point of view, but just kind of as a liaison from our perspective. And also Nancy Westcott for PACE, the people accessing, what is it, taking control of their environment, something like that. Just a brief background. So you have the full report in your packet, and it'll be online on our Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory board page for anybody that wants to read the full report. So I'm just going to be going through some highlights. So briefly, BPAC was established in 2006. Provides an advisory role. We don't have any official capacity to vote on budgets or anything like that. So it's pretty much, besides what is listed in the city code, what our responsibilities are, it's pretty much up to you to tell us what you're interested in and for us to come up with our own recommendations on the various topics. We have been a bicycle-friendly community recognized by League of American Bicyclists since 2010. That requires quite a bit of a pretty rigorous process to evaluate your infrastructure, your kind of planning capabilities, what kind of education you do for the community, your safety, things you're doing for safety and education and equity and things like that. So and then you get a report card at the end that shows you where you're doing good and where you're not doing so good, and that's always really useful. So we just applied again for 2022. You have to renew it or reapply every 4 years and hope that you still get the same level or higher and hope you don't slip down. I mean, we are still, as far as I know, the only bicycle gold community in the state of Illinois, mostly because we do have a high number of people bicycling and walking, but we also have pretty good infrastructure. It's a pretty easy city to get around if you're biking or walking. There's a page or two in your annual report that discusses the benefits of active transportation for communities as a whole and highlights how Urbana is pretty exceptional when you compare us to other cities nationwide and even in Illinois as far as the number of people who walk or bike to work, just because it is fairly easy to get to the major employment areas. So it's mostly a structure of, or a matter of the city structure, and keeping that in mind as we develop and having places to walk to and nearby services is always a good idea. Couple of just travel time maps, not time travel maps. Will show you how far you can get in 15 minutes from the city building, whether if you're riding your bike or walking. This year we adopted some goals. It's a little different for us. We're working on them last year. So we have these 5 target areas, and then under each one there are kind of responsibilities that people have volunteered to take on and present different topics every week or every month. And then we also will be reviewing progress and updating them at least once a year. So a few infrastructure highlights from last year. North Lincoln, or north part of South Lincoln Avenue was resurfaced. That took quite a while, but has a really nice change, nice crosswalks and ramps. And on Main Street here, there's actually a refuge island, which we've never had before. So it makes it a lot easier. You only have to cross 2 lanes at a time, and people will more likely see you if you're waiting there, and there's all kinds of signage and everything. Also, it's kind of a unique treatment is where it kind of suggests that cyclists should go off onto the sidewalk there to use the crosswalk instead of going straight across. The cyclist has a choice if there's nobody coming and they want to go straight across, they can, but if it looks like they're going to have to wait a while or walk their bike across or something like that, it's nice to have that option, and then you can use the refuge island too if you need it. One of the infrastructure improvements that happened was the Windsor Road resurfacing. The old Windsor Road, the bicycle lanes was separated by a 8-inch wide rumble strip that also had gaps, like every 15, 20 feet, or actually I think it's every 30 feet, it has about a 10-foot gap. But when they redid it this time, they're wider rumble strips and there's no gaps. So it's going to take some getting used to that. It's almost like a protected bike lane that's not protected, but it's not really ideal, and it's not what's recommended in the bike plan. But it's in one of the Illinois local highway manuals for rural highways, or rural highways near cities where there's high incidences of people running off the road. But the problem with that was if you're cycling, sometimes you need to get out of the bike lane to get into, say, the left lane to make a turn, or else, like this picture is showing coming up, going east to Race Street. So this is coming up toward Meadowbrook. And I don't know if you can see it there, but there's a sidewalk. So you can take the sidewalk, then you go behind this tree where nobody can see you, and you can go across. So if somebody's making a right turn there, it's more likely to get right hooked if they're going to be turning right there and you're trying to go straight across. So really the safest thing to do on your bike is to get out into the right lane and go straight across. Because if you're going straight, there's no bike lane. Well, there is a side path there, I guess, if you want to take the side path. But more likely, a lot of people would be coming up this way and wanting to turn left. So you'd want to get out into the left turn lane. And this kind of suggests that you should stay on the sidewalk and then go to the corner and maybe press the button twice to get across the street both ways. So it's not the best plan, but it's what we ended up with, and we looked into whether we could change it or not. It wasn't designed by our engineering staff, it was designed by a contract engineer. Here's another picture of the same, there aren't any gaps there. It did rain that day, so it looks like there's gap, but this is a solid 16-inch rumble strip the whole way. And you can ride across it, but if you have thin tires or if you don't have real good grip on your handlebars, it's just another possibility to lose control there. So in this case, people are making right turns a lot. They're coming in the morning, especially coming down Windsor Road, turning right to go up Lincoln. This is Lincoln here. And if you're on a bike and you want to go straight, the safest place to be is to merge out into the right travel lane, get behind the people that are waiting to turn, and then just keep going straight across. So that way you don't risk getting right hooked with somebody turning in front of you, or sometimes people don't use their blinkers, so you don't know they're going to turn. You're riding right alongside of them, and they don't see you because you're in their blind spot. So there's all kinds of problems that can happen if you're trying to go straight there. So we're real excited about the equity and quality of life projects that you budgeted for That was $2 million total. 1.2 million will be going for sidewalks and paths, and about $800,000 for streetlights. And there's 10 projects underway in some kind of design phase or other process. And I think another 6 that are being studied because they needed more study. But this is a future site of the multi-use path that will connect kind of where Church Street crosses Lincoln in the distance there by Carl Hospital. Connect that to the south end of Harvey Street. So it's being used now. You can see it's a footpath. It's been used for years and years, but the city owns the right-of-way there, so it'll be nice to actually get that paved. And the people that own this vacant lot right next to it do, you can't tell here because I think this isn't quite on their lot, but they do mow it and they keep it in pretty good shape. Yeah. So yeah, that one we made recommendations for last year, and you approved the projects. So hopefully we can keep doing stuff like that as you get funding, available. Oh, is that my time already? Was that 10 minutes or 5?
I'll make a motion to extend it for 5 more minutes.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay. You got 5 more minutes, Bill.
Okay, thanks. So we're continuing to work on Vision Zero. There were 2 pedestrian fatalities last year, both of them near 5 Points. One was somebody walking across on Cunningham there near Park Street. I think that was at night. It might have been a visibility issue. The other one was a man in a scooter early last year that was trying to cross here, and somebody was coming out on Water Street making a left turn and caught him there. That one, there is going to be a study for this area, but we just want to remind you too that the traffic fatalities as a pedestrian increase exponentially with the increase in speed limit. It's not just because, it's not just because when you get hit, it does more damage because it's going faster. Think of this case here. This guy making the left turn probably was watching traffic that was moving pretty quick and trying to get through a gap. If the speed limit's lower, you have more time. You don't have to hurry out into these gaps and make left turns without having enough time to look in all directions and watch for pedestrians and everything. There's also a new federal project, Safe Streets for All, with $5 billion appropriated over 5 years. The Regional Planning Commission applied for a grant last year for infrastructure and was unsuccessful. They were way oversubscribed for infrastructure grants and way undersubscribed for planning grants, so we'd recommend to apply for a planning grant like a Vision Zero action plan that we need. Of course, now everybody thinks they're oversubscribed, so everybody might do the opposite next year, but we're hopeful that we could get something going there. So other things we discussed, we had some interns that helped do the bicycle master plan review. We sent a no parking near bike lanes recommendation to Traffic Commission. Talked about the East University Avenue project, and provided some support letters for the successful grants that were just awarded a couple weeks ago. The ITEP grants for Baker Lane and Florida Avenue, we're real excited about those. That'll be a huge improvement, especially that Florida Avenue one. I know that one's been in the works for a long time. And traffic calming policies. So, any questions?
You have time for a
this-
couple questions.
This is ribbon cutting for First Street path. It's not in Urbana, but wanted to put it in there because that's another example of they applied for the ITEP grants multiple times to get that, and that was one if you're a cyclist in Urbana that rides out in the country or rides over that direction towards Savoy, you know how bad that was needed along that stretch. And that other picture you can't see real well, but just want to give kudos to Clark Lindsay because they provided these temporary solar-powered lights along the sidewalk there during the construction because they took out the lights that were in the parking lot that normally lit that area because they were using it for a staging area. And put in a plug for the bike safety quiz, rideillinois.org. If you haven't done it yet, it's in your packet, and I suggest you try it. There's different quizzes there, and they're kind of fun to do. Okay,
Chris?
Chris.
Yeah, about the refuge islands on Lincoln, they are nice, but there's no lights, no signage as to what we're all supposed to do. So I did go into the refuge island. You're right, they can see you, and we're all like, okay, do I stop for you? And so we're kind of, what happened in my case was the person in the left lane did that. They stopped and started waving me over. But that blocks the view of the person coming on the right side. And so he literally is like the pick in the block for the other guy to kill me. So so anyway, I don't know how to solve that, Bill, but I just wanted to give you some customer feedback
Yeah,
on
that's been a item of discussion. There's advanced stop, they have advanced stop lines like on campus where you see those little signs that say stop here for pedestrians. We don't have those on Lincoln. They determined at the time that they weren't warranted. And also for that intersection at Main, originally we had hoped for one of the push button beacons that would actually set off a light, but there wasn't enough traffic at that time when they did this study. That was probably 3 or 4 years ago. Now traffic count and see if that's improved, and it's harder once it's already done to go back and pay for another light, but if it's warranted there, then we should
I'm just
try
letting
it.
you know what's happening, and we'll just have to see what, as experience will tell us what needs to happen.
Okay, one more, Sharice.
I'm just going to piggyback on what you were saying, because I lived in California for a very long time, and they actually passed legislation that if the left lane, if you're in a double 4-lane thing, if the left lane stops for a pedestrian, the right lane, wrote it into their driving stuff. The right lane should stop too. And that keeps folks from, so that may be something that you may want to try to lobby for with state representatives, to have that type of legislation, and it would be statewide.
Yeah, I think it might be a law, but it's a matter of people knowing about it too, so maybe do some education on that. Yeah.
Just to say.
Okay. Thank you very much, Bill. Next up, we have the next chapter in Examine Urbana, and this one's on development and taxes, and City Administrator Carol Mitten will be presenting, along with Andrea Rudy.
And this is the third time we're before you going over Examine Urbana. The first time we had the introduction chapter. Last week we had transportation. Carol is going to go over development and taxes this week, and we'll still have housing and arts and culture yet to cover.
Thank you. I'm very excited to present this chapter. This is my favorite chapter, as Lily knows. And I have a few slides to show you, but I want those to reinforce the things that I want people to take away and think about from this chapter. So I just want to give a little overview of the kinds of things that you'll see when you wander into the development and taxes chapter. So it's about development and taxes, naturally. So part of it is you'll see the history, and you'll see how Urbana has developed over time. The land use patterns, learn a little bit about how those land use patterns were influenced by zoning, which came in 1936. Yeah. And you'll see the impact of the expansion of the university, and with a lot of other uses, county uses, federal uses, MTD, UCSD, churches, and so forth, we now have more than a quarter of our land area is tax exempt. So that's important sort of background information to have. And then in the more recent trends over the last 10 years, most of the new development has been in multifamily residential. So you see all of that laid out in more detail. And then you'll also learn about development and the influence that the city has on development. So that comes in the form of zoning, including historic preservation. You'll learn about the role of building codes and energy codes on development, and also the role of incentives that the city can provide in the form of tax increment financing, development agreements, enterprise zone, and so forth. So it's a good just kind of overview of all that. And then you'll also learn where the city gets its revenue from and how development impacts taxes. So one of the things I want people to, kind of big picture as they look at this chapter, we've talked every year at budget time about what the trends are and that we need to, in order to have a balanced budget over the long term, our recurring revenues need to exceed recurring expenses. And so how do we make sure that happens? And so there's a number of considerations that are offered in the chapter, and I'm going to add one today because we've been talking about this, we're starting to talk about this with council, but these are things for the community members to think about. So if we need more revenue, one of the things that we can do is we can raise revenue through taxes or fees. Another way to do it is we can diversify the tax base, and we can attract more uses that pay more taxes as opposed to ones that don't. So I talked about the number of uses that we have that are tax exempt. Well, we get more that pay taxes, and maybe we get ones that pay sales taxes versus people that are in the business that don't pay sales taxes. So diversifying the tax base is another way to get more revenue. We can increase development overall, and that's what this chapter, I think, is really helping people understand what does that mean. And that's, again, provided that development is not tax exempt. And then another thing we can do to keep those lines from crossing the revenue line and the expense line is we can decrease costs to provide government services, but that would mean reducing services, which the community has been reluctant to embrace. So now, the three things that I would like people to take away from this chapter for future consideration. The first one is to understand the recent history of our growth and why that approach, so we've been doing a lot of annexation, why that approach isn't sustainable. So these are a few slides that Lily put together for me that are from this chapter of Examine Urbana. So what you'll see is that over time, because of annexations, we actually have our population per square mile has decreased. So we had in 1970, the population per square mile was 6,400, and now it's basically half that. That means we added land and not people in proportion. That's not sustainable because as we do that, we're adding infrastructure that needs to be taken care of, but not the people to pay for it. So here's a really cool visual that Lily put together that shows the more recent trends, and these are not cumulative. This is what are we annexing over time, and you'll see that in the more recent past, starting probably just prior to 2000, there's a lot of pink on the bottom. That's all undeveloped or underdeveloped land. So we're kind of swelling our land area without things necessarily being that land necessarily generating taxes, and the same is true for open space. And then finally, this one really drives it home to me. If you look at the population in 1970 versus the population in 2020, it's increased but not very much, and you look at the size of the road network, and it's increased by almost 2.5. So that's just the road network. That's not other forms of infrastructure, but that to me really captures it. So I hope people will take time to really take in the other detail that's in the chapter and think hard about that. The second thing is understanding where the city's taxes come from. We usually talk about this at budget time, but it's worth revisiting here and think about the different kinds of taxes and what we might do to generate more of those taxes. So this is a favorite of where do the taxes from property taxes go, and you'll see that the vast majority of it goes to the school district, and then there's various slices for other local entities. But the slice that goes to the city of Urbana is 13 cents out of every dollar, and then 5 cents of that goes to the library, 5 cents of that goes to police and fire pensions, and then 3 cents goes to the city of Urbana. So of that dollar, only 3 cents goes to the operations of the city of Urbana. So that's important for people to know. So if we don't get a lot of money from property taxes, where do we get it? So we get a lot of our revenue from state and local sales taxes. We get some from state income taxes, And then property tax is 12% of the total of our pie. It's 3% of that dollar, but it's of all the taxes we get, it's 12%. And then we have various other taxes, including food and beverage taxes and so forth. So to think about, okay, if we're looking at the big generators, then it's important that we're generating sales tax, income tax. Property tax is important too, but sales tax is really important. So thinking about that and the sustainability of the city. So the last thing I want people to think about is how does development interface with the taxes? And this is the stunner. From the first time that Lily showed this to me, I was blown away. So this shows you basically the intensity of benefits or support that land gets from the city. So if it's a dark green, that's a big generator. And if it's a light color or even if it's pink, it's less of a generator and more of something that requires support. So it's hard to tell what all that is, so Lily labeled a few things. So you'll see that some of the tallest green bars are student housing, and they're higher density student housing. Now, just as just sort of a surrogate for downtown, you'll see that there's also there's a pointer for Lincoln Square Mall, because that's sort of the center of downtown, and you'll see that that's a light pink. So that's not a big generator. And you heard it from, what's that fellow's name? Say again?
I don't remember his name, but the strong
No,
towns.
David, is it David Huber?
Oh,
Yeah, he gave public comment a few weeks back, and he talked about how, this is property taxes, okay? But if you think about some of there's a lot of, just think about downtown. And one of the hallmarks of downtown, and you'll learn this if you look at the development and taxes chapter, is that 44% of the land downtown is in parking lots. Those are privately owned parking lots, those are publicly owned parking lots. So you can imagine that's not a big generator of taxes, right? And so in most communities, downtown is an engine for tax revenue. Our downtown is not. And so the areas that are the most intense are closer to campus because they have student housing, or it's along University Avenue. So that's something that people have to confront, which is if we want more development, because that's a way of generating more revenue, and we want that development to either generate income tax, so it needs people living in it, or we want it to generate sales tax and perhaps other taxes, where should that be? So that's another thing that I want people to, as they review this chapter, to think about, because that's the guidance that's a big, important question that the guidance will come in the new comp plan. So with that, those are my three takeaways. I hope people read this chapter. It's very interesting. I'd be shocked if you didn't learn something. I know I did when I read it, and that's always fun. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Chris?
Thank you for the presentation. I did read through it today. Beautiful job on the history of zoning. Beautiful job on the development. I mean, wow, I learned my job finally. So it's really great work. Taxes. I guess as a regular person, I mean, I appreciate the proportion and the identification of what kind of taxes they are. I guess I'm surprised I didn't see like, okay, it's the motor fuel tax, here's the rate of per gallon tax that we're collecting, and then the amount for FY22, like the total amount of the money. And I mean, you did a good job of the percentages, and you gave us the 40 million operating budget, but I don't know how much each tax generates.
That's actually, that's a really good point, and there's a lot of different topics, I think, for each chapter that we're just trying to give people a brief overview, and we definitely lean towards proportions for everything to kind of, instead of get into the numbers per se, we're really just trying, try to go for the proportionality, so it kind of sticks with people a little bit better. We try to err on being a little bit more visual and proportional on data, so.
The other thing I would add is that I think that on the taxes side, that's primarily focused on general fund revenue and not revenue that's going into any designated fund, like the local motor fuel tax fund or the stormwater fund or anything like that.
Okay, and just, one last question, I'm done. But Carol, am I hearing in your presentation, and it kind of Alderperson Wu will back me up here, but in the Strong City presentation we saw about 6 months ago, that periphery development doesn't work because you create this massive infrastructure that we can't afford necessarily, and we need infill development.
Right, and I think you see that here, right? And you'll see there's more texture to all this if you look at the chapter itself. But what you see is, if you look at what's on the screen right now, you'll see that there's very little green on the edges, and that's because it's a lot of infrastructure. That's what I was trying to illustrate. And you'll see the pattern of annexation through the history part of the chapter, and that's not the path to success. You really have to be thoughtful about as you if you decide, if a community decides to grow through annexation, how are you going to make that land productive, and from a taxing sense.
I might add too, when we reviewed the economic development plan, the interim plan, you remember that we focused on areas that did already have infrastructure, so that we weren't doing that, having our attention spent on areas that are going to cost the city more money. We really tried to focus on those that have infrastructure in place, and so that they're quicker to develop as well.
Could you give the example of Gather, what that will generate?
Yeah, so Gather's a really good example of enterprise zone. And so when Gather applied for its permitting and everything, it got an enterprise zone incentive. And what that means is that it will be eased into paying a full property tax. That helps with that development gap that we also talk about a little bit. And if you want nice things, they cost money. And just these days, building things it's always been expensive, but it's very expensive. So the enterprise zone helps incentivize building the building, but it also will for us, put a permanent property on the tax rolls for many, many years to come, decades to come. And so, for instance, that property is easier to look at because its sale is public record. So it just sold for $63 million. So yeah, I just saw some eyebrows raised. And so if you do the quick math for what their property tax bill is, that would be about $2 million a year, which that Campus Circle is the highest one right there. And what you're seeing really are buildings that are really land efficient, and that's what makes places as well. So there's also this kind of triple bottom line. You're being efficient with your land. You're doing good things for sustainability and walkability. So you see Campus Circle is way up there, and then if you see Gather in 10 years' time or 7 years' time, whenever their enterprise zone rolls off, it will be even higher because it's very efficient. What it's doing is it's bringing in $2 million in the amount of space of a city block that if it was, say, really lower density housing, or if it was like a self-storage or something on Philo Road, you could kind of compare it to something like that. It would be probably even maybe not bringing enough to pay for even the infrastructure that it's using. Which is fine, those kinds of things are okay as a city, but you have to have things to pay for that. And that's the crucial, important part.
Grace.
Thanks so much for the information and the graphics here. I was wondering if you could provide a little more context to how these are calculated, like how the Lincoln Square Mall is at a zero revenue minus expenses, and how the city-owned parking lot plays into that, if that's the factor.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we used so this map is really trying to tie development costs versus development what you get back. So what we used was property taxes, and what we had to do in order to do that, unfortunately, how we tax things, you can have a lot of tax parcels. So say I have an older home, and the older home has actually 2 parcels instead of tax parcels, and some of the tax money I pay every year goes to here, and some of it comes to here. So we went through the city and we combined all of the parcels. So you have a church and it's 9 parcels because in 1950 it was 9 homes, and then the church decided I needed a bunch of car parking. And so they bought those homes, made car parking. We had to combine all of that, add up the taxes, add up the area, add up a bunch of other things too as well, to make our data set. And then what we were able to do is then take our CIP numbers and our hard infrastructure costs, the things that they're relying to pay for that. We had about, we had 13 sample areas to test out our hard infrastructure costs to real-world Urbana blocks. They were all very, very different mixes. You know, some of them were mixed-use blocks, some of them were different development periods of residential. We tested that against our infrastructure costs, and we got to a number per square foot, not square foot, linear feet of lot right-of-way frontage. We took the right-of-way frontage for all of our zoning lots, is what I would call them, but, you know, of our lots across the city. And then we multiplied that by that number, so that way we weren't actually using land use, so we could be more neutral on what the land use is, and then find out then what the results are per land use for that. I think there's a chart in the taxes chapter that breaks it over land use as well.
Thank you so much. And so
Yeah.
then that's property taxes, right? You're saying also like sales taxes and things aren't factored in there, right? Like,
It's
like
not,
that's what you're
yeah.
saying, the use. If it is a business with sales of a good versus services, and those are taxed differently, and that's not factored, right?
Yeah, because what we're trying to do is look at the development approval process to development, what it's going to take in hard infrastructure. So that analysis would be great. It would answer a different kind of question, and then you'd also want to take in all of the costs as well. So like police and fire service costs would be added into instead of just hard infrastructure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Chandra?
I have more of a comment than a question, but I appreciate you breaking down all of these by chapter and allowing us to really digest the comp plan because the comp plan lasts so long, we definitely want to make sure we're understanding and making the right choices to go into the comp plan. So I appreciate you giving us digestible pieces.
And just as a quick comment, will be hopefully a living document, so it will be something that, though it's got this long viewpoint, 20 years, don't think that the community has 20 years with it. It's something that you can update, and you probably should update periodically. Some states even regulate that.
And Chandra, I think you brought home too that it really is a resource for all of us. You know, you as council members, we as staff, you know, we can refer people to it. So if people want information on various topics, we can refer them to this document, and I think it'll be very helpful. And just to remind everybody, it's examine.urbanaillinois.us.
One last question.
So we get this question quite frequently, and I just wanted to confirm, so you had already mentioned enterprise zones. Enterprise zones are defined at the state level. Is that correct, or are they defined at the federal level? I don't think the city of Urbana has the ability to define what an enterprise zone is.
Go ahead. So we define kind of the properties that fill into it, but it is a state program.
Right, so you have to file the information with the state and go through that process. Is that correct?
Yes, and while the city of Urbana does actually collect the properties and identify them, I don't want to mislead you and think that it's, you know, super easy and we do it every year. It's something that comes up only periodically.
Do you know what the cadence is?
What's the question?
The cadence.
The cadence for updating it?
I can tell you that our enterprise zone expires in 2031.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
So stay tuned next week. I believe it's Arts and Culture. Is that right, Lily? Next week? I believe. Yeah. Yeah. And Lily's going to do that one herself. So if you imagine.
You'll know by next week.
Yeah. So stay tuned.
Thank you very much. All right, we'll move on to public input. Does anyone wish to address the Urbana City Council? Please step up to the mic. Doesn't look like anyone. We'll move on to council input and communications. Any information to share with the public? All right, there's no unfinished business. Moving next to reports of standing committees, and Mary Alice will report out for James Quisenberry.
All right, we have a lot of items on the consent agenda, so bear with me. There's a lot. Okay, all right, let's go. Resolution number 2023-04018R, a resolution approving and authorizing the execution of an ARPA subrecipient agreement with the Urbana Free Library. And resolution number 2023-04019R, a resolution approving and authorizing the execution of an ARPA subrecipient agreement with the Eastern Illinois Food Bank. And resolution number 2023-04020R, a resolution approving and authorizing the execution of an ARPA subrecipient agreement with the Red Herring Restaurant. And resolution number 2023-04021R, a resolution approving and authorizing the execution of an ARPA subrecipient agreement with Common Ground Food Co-op. And resolution number 2023-04022R, a resolution approving and authorizing the execution of an ARPA subrecipient agreement with Habitat for Humanity of Champaign County. And resolution number 2023-04023R, resolution approving and authorizing the execution of an ARPA subrecipient agreement with Carl Hope Village. And resolution number 2023-04024R, resolution approving and authorizing the execution of an ARPA subrecipient agreement with First Followers. And resolution number 2023-04025R, a resolution approving and authorizing the execution of an ARPA subrecipient agreement with Sola Gracia Farm. And resolution number 2023-04026R, a resolution approving and authorizing the execution of an ARPA subrecipient agreement with the Well Experience. And resolution number 2023-04027R, resolution approving and authorizing the execution of an ARPA subrecipient agreement with the Urbana Neighborhood Connection Center. And resolution number 2023-04029R, CDBG Senior Repair Program Agreement between the City of Urbana and Champaign County Regional Planning Commission. And resolution number 2023-04030R, resolution approving the transfer of volume cap in connection with private activity bond issues, single-family mortgage revenue bonds, and related matters with the private bond cap allocation of EIEDA Program Series 2023. And finally, resolution number 2023-04031R, resolution approving the transfer of volume cap in connection with private activity bond issues for single-family mortgage revenue bonds and related matters with private bond cap allocation IHDA Series 2023.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Moved by Mary Alice, seconded by Chandra. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Miss Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Evans,
Yes.
Miss Hersey,
Yes.
Miss Colacetti,
Yes.
Miss Bishop,
Yes.
Miss Wilkin.
Yes.
That motion passes. Regular agenda?
All right, on behalf of the Committee of the Whole, I move approval for resolution number 2023-04028R, resolution approving an intergovernmental agreement concerning Boneyard Creek Project.
Is there a second?
Second.
Before discussion, I believe Carol had some updates from John Zeman.
I do, thank you. So in the packet, you had a slightly revised IGA that had what the addition of some, it's boilerplate language, but very important boilerplate language, added about the, that the performance of the undertakings will comply with all laws, and then there's an indemnification section too. Those are standard, and that hadn't been included in the draft that was included that you first saw, but that was in the packet for this week. And then I also wanted to call your attention to the fact that the bid tabulation sheet is now complete, because the bids were open, I guess, on April 14th. And so you'll see that the bids came in well below the engineer's estimate. So what had been originally in the memo, that the city's share was going to be approximately $400,000, the city's share is now $167,686.42. And that is delineated on page 364 of the online packet, if you wanted to see the breakdown. But, so that's a significant savings because the bids came in well below what we had anticipated. So John wanted me to share all that with you before you took your vote.
Any questions for Carol? Discussion. Grace?
I just want to say thanks for the follow-up and breaking it down. I appreciate seeing the numbers, so thanks to you and John and others who made it possible.
Any other discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Miss Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Evans,
Yes.
Miss Hersey,
Yes.
Miss Colacetti,
Yes.
Miss Bishop,
Yes.
Miss Wilkin.
Yes.
That motion passes.
On behalf of the Committee of the Whole, I move approval for resolution number 2023-04032R, resolution approving the City of Urbana and Urbana Home Consortium, Champaign-Urbana, Champaign County Annual Action Plan for fiscal year 2023-2024.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Moved by Mary Alice, seconded by Chandra. Any discussion? Grace?
I just had a question if there were any changes from the last week. Didn't know if, is that this page 36 was changed to 60? Was that the only change from last week? Great, thanks so much.
Did that answer your question? Yes. Okay. Any other questions, comments? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Miss Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Evans,
Yes.
Miss Hersey,
Yes.
Miss Colacetti,
Present.
Miss Bishop,
Yes.
Miss Wilkin.
Yes.
That motion passes. Thank you, Mary Alice. Reports of special committees. Don't believe there are any. Reports of officers. I do have several announcements. Two of them are related to public safety. First of all, there will be a moderated town hall scheduled for May 4th, 2023. It'll be held at Vineyard Church, 1500 North Lincoln. And this is for the purpose of, this is a town hall with our police chief candidate finalist, Mr. Larry Boone from Norfolk, Virginia. There are two town halls. People can attend one or both of them. One is scheduled for 3:30 to 5 p.m. and the other is 6:30 to 8 p.m. There will be a press release and further information available tomorrow as far as the format, and we'll circulate that with council and to the public. So that's May 4th at Vineyard Church. The second public safety related event is May 9th, and this will be a facilitated town hall with Barry Dunn, which is the consulting firm conducting our public safety review. That's going to be at Stone Creek Church, 5:30 to 7:30 p.m., 2502 South Race Street. And the purpose of this is to gather community input on public safety and alternative response models, and that will be conducted by Barry Dunn. And we'll be sending out more information on that as well. So two separate events related to public safety coming up in the next couple of weeks. Secondly, I wanted to make a note. I'm glad that the ARPA funding, ARPA agreements are being passed. The Speaker of the House has not let up on attempts to claw back our unobligated ARPA funds, and we received a notification from U.S. Conference of Mayors a couple of days ago. Again, to this effect, we were asked to fill out a survey documenting or showing how much of the funds we have budgeted, how much we have spent, and how much have been obligated. And what they're going after are the unobligated funds. So the sooner we get all these agreements in place, the better. We're pretty good as far as we have allocations on record. We've budgeted it all, but we'll be completely safe when all these agreements are signed. So it's very important that we finish that up, and it's very important that we stay vigilant because people have their eye on this money, so unfortunately. And then the last thing, I wanted to share some information about our trip with Champaign County First last week. Carol Mitten and I traveled to Washington, D.C. The council, I sent the memo around to the council this afternoon, and it'll be included with minutes for this meeting, so it'll be available to the public as well. But this is a very productive trip for us, and then they been holding these or taking these trips for the past 12 years or so. These are coordinated by the Champaign County Chamber of Commerce. We traveled as part of Champaign County First, which is a public-private community partnership. The focus of these trips are on local infrastructure as a key component for economic development and job creation. The units, the people, governmental units and organizations that were represented on this year's trip included Champaign, Urbana, Mahomet, Savoy, and Rantoul, the Champaign-Urbana Mass Transit District, Parkland College, University of Illinois, Champaign County Economic Development Corporation, Champaign County Regional Planning Commission, Visit Champaign County, and the Chamber of Commerce. There were 10 projects that we lobbied on this year, all infrastructure projects. Some of them we've been lobbying for several years on, others were new this year. The City of Urbana's project was the Florida Avenue Corridor Reconstruction Project. We've applied for the second time for a RAISE grant, federal grant, so we were soliciting support for that. Curtis Road grade separation, this has been on the docket on every trip I've been, but this would elevate the road, the train track over Curtis Road. So it will drastically change that intersection, improve safety for the village of Savoy, plus transportation and access for everybody. For the second year in a row, we were lobbying on the $19 million Safe Streets for All, which has a Champaign County-wide Vision Zero component. So that's a very important project for all of the county, and especially Champaign-Urbana, where much of the work will be done. We visited with Amtrak to focus their attention on the fact that we have the worst on-time performance in the country at 37%. It's disgraceful, and we are actually going to change up our approach next year. But anyway, it's an annual visit to Amtrak. We also talked about high-speed rail, the regional impact of that. Mass Transit District was focused on the purchase of grants for more hydrogen fuel cell electric buses. We have continued to advocate for mapping of the Mahomet Aquifer. Our efforts have resulted in $1 million in federal dollars through the efforts of Senator Durbin and Duckworth. We need about 20 total to complete the mapping project, but this was a good start, and we leveraged that. The Champaign County also contributed $500,000 of their ARPA funds toward it, so we've got a good start on the mapping project. This project is incredibly important to determine really the characteristics of the aquifer and for us to protect both the quality and the quantity of the water in the aquifer. There was a South Mahomet very important road project. In Rantoul, the Illinois Autonomous and Connected Track Research Track was one of the topics. And then the Visit Champaign County was promoting the Champaign County African American Heritage Trail, not so much for money this trip, but for just to put it on people's radar, and when the time comes to apply for grants, to ask that they'll support it. We met with Department of Transportation, Federal Railroad Administration, a lobbyist who gave, over lunch hour, gave tips on lobbying. State of Illinois, that's the Governor Pritzker's office in Washington. We met with Amtrak, and then Congresswomen Nikki Budzinski, Robin Kelly, Mary Miller, whose districts touch a portion of Champaign County, and then we met with Senator Tammy Duckworth and Senator Dick Durbin. And then on the back of this page are just some of this recent success stories. But again, sometimes you have to go for multiple years, advance your project. The Curtis Road Underpass is a good example. It started out as a $40 million project. They've secured about $20 million of the 40 they need. So you get these incremental successes, and they're getting closer each time. So anyway, this will be available to the public as well. So very useful trip, and we learned a lot, and we're going to get those trains running on time. And I think that's all the announcements we have. There is no new business, and so this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.